One of the few fates worse than the death of a loved one is the disappearance of a loved one, especially when they're never found and no answers ever arise. While the vast majority of the 600,000 people reported missing in the U.S. each year are quickly found, a small minority of those reported missing never turn up again after disappearing under mysterious or unexplainable circumstances. Those are the types of cases we'll focus on in today's video, with an added focus on those that disappeared from wooded areas in the wilderness, especially near and around Mount Rainier. Here's the first case. In November of 1997, a 27-year-old named Chet Hansen planned a day trip along the Deer Creek Falls trailhead at Mount Rainier National Park. Chet was an avid photographer, and he brought 35 pounds of camera equipment with him in order to catch some photographs of the picturesque scenery. Since this was only supposed to be a day trip, before he left, Chet told his mother that he'd be back home in time for dinner. The weather at the time was clear and warm, and the trail he was taking well-traveled and not particularly challenging, so it should have been a pretty safe hike. However, Chet failed to show up for dinner that evening. The next morning, when Chet didn't show up for his job at Alaska Airways, he was officially reported missing. Police were quickly able to locate his vehicle at the Deer Creek Falls trailhead, so they searched his car with the hope of finding some clue as to his current whereabouts. They found a set of negatives, his house keys, a case for his glasses, and various papers, but no sign of Chet himself or his expensive camera equipment. The trail itself was thoroughly and repeatedly searched to no avail. One potential witness told park rangers he thought he'd spotted Chet around noon on the day he went missing, but no other clues were found. Since it's possible that Chet may have gone off trail, tracker dogs and additional personnel were brought in to mount a more extensive search, but no trace of Chet or his equipment was ever found, and the dogs failed to pick up any scent whatsoever. It's as if he literally vanished into thin air. Chet remains missing and presumed dead to this day. A couple years later, in July of 1999, another person mysteriously vanished near Mount Rainier. On July 8th, a 34-year-old man named Joe Wood, who is an editor with the New Press, drove out to Mount Rainier National Park for a pleasant day of hiking and bird watching. He arrived at the park around noon, and he was never seen again. When Wood failed to show up to an important journalist convention the following day, he was officially reported missing. Wood's rental car was quickly located, but it contained no clues as to his current whereabouts. Authorities conducted another thorough search of the area, but not a single clue was found. However, park rangers did come up with one lead. A hiker claimed to have met Wood on the day he disappeared. According to this hiker, he had met Wood on the Rampart Ridge Trail at an altitude of about 4,800 feet. Apparently, Wood asked this hiker how much farther the snowy trail extended. The two hiked together for a brief time, but the hiker turned back when the pair reached a snow bridge. According to the hiker, Wood was undeterred by the snowy terrain and continued forward alone. This would be the last known sighting of Joe Wood. The terrain in the area was fairly treacherous on the day in question, as the trails were largely obscured by snow, so it was assumed that Wood was injured or lost out in the wilderness. Helicopters and tracker dogs were employed by search teams, and the entire surrounding area was scoured repeatedly, but nothing was found. Even after the snow melted and another search was carried out, not a single trace of Joe Wood was ever found. He officially remains missing to this day. More recently, in July of 2010, a 57-year-old named Eric Lewis went mountain climbing at Mount Rainier National Park with two companions, Dior Coombs Jr. and Trevor Lane. The three were climbing at a place called Gibraltar Ledges, headed towards the mountain summit. The lead climber was Dior Coombs, followed by Trevor Lane with Eric Lewis in the rear. Visibility was relatively low on this particular day, so the three climbers were tethered together in order to keep from losing each other. At one point, at an altitude of about 13,900 feet, the climbers decided to group up and take a quick break, but Lewis did not appear. When they pulled the rope up, Lewis was no longer attached to it, and it looked like Lewis had cut the rope to free himself from the other climbers. The two climbers had seen Lewis through the mist only minutes before, so they thought they would quickly find him, as he couldn't have gone far. Yet there was no sign of him downhill or at the summit. He had simply vanished. Storm and Lane made their way back to base camp and informed park rangers of the situation, who immediately carried out a massive search of the area. Eric was never found. Strangely, the only sign of Eric they did find was his backpack, climbing harness, and snow shovel in a snow cave at an altitude of 13,600 feet, just below the place where he'd gone missing. Strangely, despite the snowy ground, the only footprints found of Lewis were the ones he'd made while following his climbing partners, with no sign whatsoever that he'd broken off or wandered away. With no obvious reason why Lewis would remove himself from the rope, and no footprints to follow, and no other helpful sign of Lewis even though his partners had just seen him minutes before his disappearance, this case is truly an odd one. In the end, no one ever discovered what happened to Lewis, and he has never been found. Even more recently, in October of 2020, a 33-year-old anthropologist and assistant professor at University of Washington named Sam Dubal went out on an overnight solo hike along Mount Rainier National Park's Mother Mountain Loop Trail. Sam was a seasoned outdoorsman with extensive experience hiking and camping all over the world. On this particular excursion, he was well stocked with the proper equipment and enough provisions, and he was expected to return the next day. When he failed to show up, a comprehensive search was carried out by the National Park Service, but they found nothing. Other hikers who'd spotted Sam along his route reported that he seemed perfectly normal and didn't appear to be struggling in any way. Eerily, the only thing that would be found of Sam's was a single water bottle found lying alone on the trail. He remains missing to this day. The next 3 cases do not take place on Mount Rainier, but they fit the theme of people mysteriously vanishing from a wooded region, so I decided to include them anyway. Also, I should mention that many of these cases have been examined by a man named David Politis for his Missing 411 series. I personally think that David is unfortunately not very reliable, and that he makes claims that can't be substantiated or sees links in cases where there might not be any. He does, however, do a good job of truthfully reporting the facts of each Missing 411 case, and many of the cases he's compiled are truly bizarre. So while I don't totally endorse the entire Missing 411 narrative overall, I can't deny the unexplainable nature of many Missing 411 cases. Anyway, here's the next story. In 1981, an 84-year-old theology professor named Dr. Maurice Dammit went into Pike National Forest in Douglas County, Colorado, to collect rocks with his friend David McSherry. Dr. Dammit suffered from a range of health issues that severely limited his mobility, including very bad knees. As a result, he couldn't get very far on his own, so his friend David helped him out quite a bit. David and Dr. Dammit had a system in which David would drop Dammit off at a spot to look for his rocks while David would go to his own location nearby. David never went very far, though, and he would check on Dammit every 10 to 15 minutes since his mobility was so poor. On this day, after a few uneventful hours of rock hunting, David went to check on Dammit as usual, but he was nowhere to be seen, even though Dammit just dropped him off at this spot only 10 minutes ago. David called out for Dammit repeatedly and swept the surrounding area, but Dammit and his rock-collecting tools were gone, which is extremely odd since Dammit was physically incapable of going any significant distance on his own due to his very bad knees. Soon after, David contacted the authorities, who began an intensive search. After 5 days, not a single trace of Dammit or his tools were ever found. It's as if he vanished into thin air. Unfortunately, that's where this case ends. No trace of Dammit or his gear were ever found, and he remains missing and presumed dead to this day. This next case has a more sinister ending. In the summer of 1958, a 10-year-old boy named Bobby Bizup was camping at a Catholic youth retreat called Camp St. Malo in the Rocky Mountain National Park, along with several camp counselors and several other kids. On August 15th, Bobby, who was partially deaf, went to do some fishing at a nearby place called Cabin Creek. When it was time to head back and join the rest of the group for dinner, a camp counselor went and got Bobby to walk him back to camp. The pair began their relatively short walk back to camp with Bobby a few feet behind the counselor. According to the camp counselor, Bobby was right on his heels the whole time, but suddenly, the camp counselor glanced over his shoulder and Bobby was gone, even though he was following close behind him just moments before. Assuming that Bobby was just hiding or playing a game, the counselor called out for Bobby, but there was no sign of him anywhere. Other counselors joined in on the search but found nothing, so they contacted the authorities, who began a massive search involving nearly 400 police officers, volunteers, and airmen from the local Air Force base utilizing aircraft and tracker dogs. After 9 days, absolutely no trace of Bobby was found. The strange thing about this case is that it seems impossible that Bobby could have gone anywhere on his own so fast, as the surrounding region is mountainous and heavily wooded. A year later, in June 1959, some torn clothing, a broken hearing aid, and a few bone fragments were found in the middle of nowhere, 3 miles away from where Bobby had gone missing, an additional 2,500 feet up the mountain. The bones were confirmed to be Bobby's. Strangely, this area had previously been thoroughly searched. Plus, the area in which the remains were found would be almost impossible for Bobby to reach on his own. There's also the question of what happened to the rest of his body. Unfortunately, to this day, nobody knows what really happened to Bobby. Today's last case unfolded in Rocky Mountain National Park, this time in July of 2015, when 2-year-old Dior Coombs Jr. was camping with his father, his father's girlfriend, the girlfriend's grandfather, and their friend Isaac. At one point, the child's father and the father's girlfriend left the boy at the campsite with the grandfather for a very short time. When they returned, the boy was gone, and the grandfather said he was simply there one second and gone the next. They frantically searched the surrounding area with no luck, so they reported him missing and a much larger official search unfolded. Authorities did not suspect kidnapping since there was only one narrow dirt road leading in and out of the campground, and any animal attack likely would have left evidence behind and been noticed by the grandfather, so nobody knew what to make of this case. Since the missing boy is only 2 years old, you'd think he wouldn't be able to make it very far on his own. However, he was never found, and remains missing today. I hope you enjoyed those cases. It seems like certain specific areas in North America are particular hotspots in terms of frequent unexplained disappearances, and Mount Rainier is definitely one of those areas. The 4 stories from Mount Rainier included in this video are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to unexplainable disappearances taking place there. Also, stay tuned and subscribe to my channel for more mysterious missing person videos in the future, plus all kinds of other content related to various dark and creepy topics. And feel free to leave a comment in this video letting me know if there's any specific topic you'd like me to cover in a future video. Anyway, thanks for watching.